Hello everyone and welcome to the Deployment Research YouTube channel. My name is Johan Arvidmark, and in this video you will learn how to build an offline media to deploy Windows 11 using MDT Lite Touch. This video is an updated version of one I did about 2 years ago as part of the ConfigMess 2022 series. That one focused on Windows 10 and also assumed that you had an MDT environment already up and running. In today's demo, I will show you how to do it end-to-end, from basically having nothing to have a media that they can use to deploy a basic Windows 11 image, some settings, applications, drivers, shorthand, everything you need. And that means demo time. So here I have a virtual machine named MDT01. This is going to be the server I install MDT on and use to create the deployment share, add all the stuff to it, and eventually generate the offline media. Now, it doesn't have to be a Windows Server OS, even though that's what I happen to use in this demo. MDT will happily install on either a Windows 10 or Windows 11 box as well. But let me jump over to that machine. Here I have downloaded a few things that I need for the demo. I have downloaded the latest version of MDT. I have downloaded a hotfix to make sure it detects UEFI machines correctly. I have downloaded a fix to make sure that MDT works correctly with Windows ADK 22H2. And this is, by the way, the ADK version I do recommend currently, no matter what you're deploying. Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows Server, doesn't matter. This is currently the best version of the ADK. There are more recent versions available. For example, there is a freshly released ADK 24H2, but we found some bug fixes related to PowerShell in that one, so I prefer to stick with this one. This one works beautifully to deploy even more recent version than 22H2 with it. I've also downloaded an application just to show how we can add some apps to MDT for the media. I have some scripts that I will show shortly, and I also have downloaded a few drivers that I'm going to need for the deployment. So I have, in this case, a driver package for a Dell Latitude 3120 laptop, and I have downloaded some drivers for WinP itself, storage and network drivers. Also, what I have in my ISO folder here is a freshly downloaded Windows 11 23H2 ISO. This one is updated with the July update, so I just got it straight from the visualstudio.com website there. Now, first I need to install the ADK. That's an MDT requirement. So I'm going to start with the ADK install. Super simple. Default location. I'm going to select the components I need for MDT. That will be the first. These are the ones that MDT needs. Going to continue with the install. Done. And then install the WinP add-on. Super simple, install this one as well. Single component that needs to be added. Next step is to install MDT itself. Also a very basic installer, default location. And once that is done, I need to apply that hotfix I mentioned earlier. So I'll go into the hotfix folder. I'm going to start with the 64-bit one and copy that one over. So that needs to be copied to this folder here. Replace the existing one. I don't do any 32-bit deployments, but I usually take a habit of adding the 32-bit one as well in the event I would like to try something there. So that is done. Now, in order to add support for ADK22H2, there are two things I need to do. First, I need to replace the NN10 file or the template for the Windows PE component in it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that one over. That one needs to go into the templates folder, replacing the existing one. And since there are no 32-bit components in the ADK22H2, I need to pretend it is installed. Otherwise, MDT is going to be upset. So I'll go over here, Program Files, Windows Kits, 10, Assessment, WinPE, and I'm going to create a x86 folder. And in that folder, I'm going to create a subfolder called this, because that's all what MDT actually looks for. It doesn't look for any files in it, it just checks the presence of that folder. So, simple enough. Alright, so now I have a MDT installed. Going ahead and launch the workbench and create myself a deployment share. I'm going to call it MDT production. Good name as any. I'm going to share it as MDT production. And I'm going to give it a description, MDT production. I don't bother about these settings. I will override them later anyway. But now I have a deployment share. The next step is start to populate it with some operating systems, applications, drivers, and sequences. So obviously I will need to have an operating system first, and so far I only have an ISO file. When you have an ISO file, it's super simple to extract a Vim file from it. So here I have a PowerShell script, and you will find the link to this one in the description below. But this simply mounts the ISO file and extracts the index that I'm interested in this case Windows 11 Enterprise, and the ISO file I'm using is this one here, the one I showed you earlier. So I'm going to run this script. And if I go to the Vim folder here, I now have an Enterprise Vim extracted from that ISO. Perfect. So let's start to add in an operating system. It's not a requirement to create a folder, but it definitely doesn't hurt to have a folder structure. So I'm going to import an operating system. It's going to be a custom image, and I'm going to point it to that file that I just extracted. This one here. Folder name is good. Done. And the only thing I'm going to give it a little bit of a better name. So this is just a label. Perfect. Next thing, I'm going to add in a few drivers. So first off, I'm going to create a folder called Windows 11. 64-bit. And in here, I'm going to create a folder for the model I had. Latitude 3120. I've seen some organizations doing multiple levels, so they have Windows 11 and then a vendor like Dell and then the model, but I know already that this is a Dell machine, so I try to keep it simple. Also, I'm going to create a folder for my WinPE drivers, or boot image drivers. I didn't get that name quite right. Much better. And I'm going to have to import the drivers. So I will start with this one. Import. Find my drivers folder. So this is the latitude folder, and you can see the different drivers or driver folders beneath it. It's going to take a little bit, but due to the magic of video recordings, I will simply cut down the weight on this one. Now, the import has completed. I'm not too concerned about the warnings. There were just a few drivers that were flagged with the wrong architecture. I'm going to click Finish here. Next up is the drivers for the boot image. Import those. Drivers, WinPE, and next. And we'll wait for that one. Perfect. Next thing, since you want to be very specific what drivers MDT uses for the boot image, meaning this folder only, you should always go ahead and create a selection profile for it. So I'm going to create a new one. Select that folder. And we will use that in a little bit. Next step is to add an application. It's going to be Notepad++. And I believe the version was 869. The files are in this folder. And this target folder is just fine. And the command line is the executable /s for silent, and that's all it takes to install Notepad++ silently. So now I have added in an image, I have added a bunch of drivers, I have an application, and I can go ahead and create the sequence. So like for the OS, I will create a folder, not because you need to, but because it makes sense. And I'm going to create a new sequence. And give it a name. Perfect. Now, technically, I could probably have skipped the x64 in the name, since Windows 11 is not available in 32-bit versions anymore. But since other operating systems still supports it, I have taken a habit of always adding it in for consistency. I'm going to select the OS. And I'm not going to worry about any of these settings. They will all be configured in the custom settings in the file anyway. So now I have added the basic things. The next step will be to create the media. So I will go down to Media. The trick here is to create the media in a folder outside of the deployment share. So in this case, I have a separate folder in the root of my E drive for the media. Since I only have Windows 11 stuff in my deployment share, I can pick the Everything profile, but you can also have sub-selection and use that as a filter if you want to. But this is fine for now. So now I have a media. What I'm going to do in that media, I'm going to replace two of the configuration files. I have those sample files here. This is a bootstrap init file that simply skips the initial welcome screen. And then I have a custom settings init file that says some basic settings for my deployment, like time zone, and it also controls the behavior of the wizard. So for example, it will ask me for computer name and domain membership. It will show a final summary for me, and it's also going to ask me what sequence I want to run. So I will copy these over. And again, these are in the sample files in the description below. I will copy that to media folder and replace the existing files. All right. Now, properties on the media. There are a few things I want to configure. First of all, I'm not worried about 32-bit boot images. And the ISO file I'm simply going to call Windows 11 Media. In the rules, this is the content of the init file that I just copied. But in the Windows PE tab, I'm going to head over to 64-bit. And in drivers and patches, this is where I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to filter to my WinPE11 profile only. And I'm going to have all drivers from that profile. So only add drivers in that folder. And hit OK. The final step is to make a few changes to the sequence to get better driver support. As you can see here, I have a Windows 11 structure with the models directly underneath. So I will go to my sequence. Gonna add in a variable here called driver group. Driver group 001. I'm gonna set that variable to the folder name and then %model %. And there should be a backslash and not a forward slash. This makes sure that MDT finds the right folder depending on the model name that you deploy of the device. And finally, this one here, as odd as it may seem, you select it to nothing, and out of nothing you select everything. This may look a little bit weird, but this is forcing this variable to take effect, so that MDT only injects drivers that are matching that folder. So basically, as long as your folder name is correct and you're deploying to that device, MDT will inject the right drivers. So hit OK. And now I'm going to update the media. The update is done, and while waiting for the update to finish, I just realized that I forgot to add in or configure MDT to ask for applications. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to click Finish here, Properties, Rules, skip applications to No, hit OK, and now I need to update the media again. I'll make sure to put in the right custom settings in the example file in the link below here. And done. Now, a great way to test this is to copy the ISO file over to a Hyper-V host or VMware host or something, so you can just verify that everything works there. Once that test is done, then it's simple to copy that content over to a USB stick, or you can use tools like Rufus, where you simply browse for the ISO and have Rufus generate the USB stick for you. But I'm going to take that file. It's in here in the media folder. This is my ISO. I will copy it over to my host, to the ISO folder. Quite okay networking speed, I'll say. And then go over to my host. I'm going to create a virtual machine. Windows 11 test 01. Created this folder here. Generation 2, a bit of memory, a network is useful, hard drive, and I'm gonna configure it to boot from that ISO that I just copied over. So this one here, my media ISO. I'm gonna give it a few more virtual CPUs, because Windows 11 on a Hyper-V host likes to have at least a few CPUs to work with. And before I booting up, I'm gonna change the checkpoints over to a standard checkpoint, and I'm gonna create a checkpoint here. I'm gonna call it clean with Windows 11 media ISO. And this allows me to very simply go back to that clean snapshot if something failed and I want to try it again. I'm going to start this virtual machine, boot on the ISO that I created, select my sequence, give it a name, I'm going to join it to a work group, and I'm going to select my Notepad++ application. And from now on, it's a fully automated deployment. It's going to apply the OS image, it's going to inject any drivers, and it will reboot back to Windows again, and eventually will install the Notepad++ application, and in the end, show me a little summary screen of my deployment. And once again, since this is a recording, I'm going to speed up this process just a little bit, and we should see the results shortly. Application's been installed, in this case Notepad++. And I have the successful summary screen in the end. I'm going to finish that one. Now we have verified that the deployment actually worked. We have a Windows 11 deployment. If I go to applications, I can see that Notepad++ is installed. And the final step, as I mentioned earlier, would be to copy this ISO file over to USB stick. There are many options for doing so. I happen to like the Rufus tool, so I'm going to go ahead and download that one. I'm going to head over to rufus.ie. And I'm going to snatch the portable version. No, thank you. I have the file. Run it. I select an ISO file. The Windows 11 media that I showed you earlier. Select the USB stick I want to use. And in this case, I'm leveraging functionality from Rufus to actually have NTFS as a file system, but still support UEFI. Otherwise, the Windows 11 WIM file won't fit on a FAT32 file system, because the WIM file is about 5 gigs in size, and FAT32 only allows file sizes up to 4 gig. But the team behind Rufus, or the developer, were able to figure out how to use a UEFI driver, or they have an NTFS driver for UEFI, which is brilliant. So hit start on this one. Are you sure? Yes. So alright, now you have a USB stick ready to go to deploy Windows 11 onto devices. That's all I had for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon again. Bye for now.